Okay, hello and welcome to a tutorial on how to build a quick, early, and easy setup for power generation utilizing thermal series. So, in order to actually make this work, you will need a spruce sapling, some arboreal extractors, some way to move fluids, some way to move items, some way to move energy, Stirling dynamo, a fractionating still, and a compression dynamo. None of which are incredibly difficult. You just need the base machine frames and some base items. The only thing that you will need to make that is not something that you can get base in the overworld is bronze, but that's just copper and tin dust, which you can make easily utilizing a pulverizer. So, again, these shouldn't be too difficult. And how this is going to work is you are going to use a spruce tree. And we're going to grab ourselves some bone meal real quick because we're using spruce trees not because of how big they grow, but actually because they just work better. And you have to actually grow it. You can't just use some form of the logs. And the reason for that is spruce trees actually produce double the resin, which resin is what we want. We don't want sap or blood. We need resin right now, and everything else will only produce 25 millibuckets of resin other than the spruce trees, which will produce 50. So what we're going to do is we're going to plop them all around. They don't take power to start working. So they're already working. We're going to we have 4 of them. So now what we're going to do, since this tree is good, what we are going to do now is we're going to carve out a little bit of a way underneath those guys just so we can get the exports, because the exports are going to be going into a fractionating still, which is going to go right there. And the reason for that is because the products, which is the resin, which is going to accumulate in here, is going to need to be increased. And what you can do is you can also add certain augments. I don't know if either of those work. They don't. So there's some augments that work. I don't actually know which ones do work for them, but I would not recommend putting particular ones in there. They're not super helpful, and it's just going to take time to accumulate. So what we're going to do is we're going to plop down the fluid pipes, which are going to go all down there, and they will be sucking the fluid once we put these extractor attachments onto place underneath. Of course, this is using another one of my favorite fun little mods for moving stuff around, known as I actually, it's Refined Pipes is the mod name. I thought it would show it, but the mod name is Refined Pipes. My favorite thing about them, though, is, as we'll see in a second, and as you can probably see right there, there's a little window. So it actually lets you, and each of these has their own internal inventory, so 32 buckets, and they transfer 3.2 buckets, or 3.2 buckets per tick, which ultimately is quite a lot. And essentially, they have little windows to tell you when they're getting full, and eventually they will be pumping into here once we open it up as an input. So now the resin's getting pumped into here. Place the dirt real quick. And what this is going to do is it's going to fill this with resin. Now what we're going to do, and you don't need these augments, but they do help, is flux efficiency and flux linkage amplifier. You can also use the integral components, and they help considerably, but they do take a little bit extra resources. So if you don't have, like, if you have Invar or if you just have Electrum, honestly, Electrum's not hard to get, neither is Enderium, but if you don't have that, you don't need it. So we're going to do it without it. But from there, essentially what is going to be produced, and we need some energy to get this guy started off. So what we're going to do, actually, is we're going to grab some coal. And I'm only grabbing coal as a way to show how this is going to work, but this is a Stirling engine, and a Stirling dynamo. And the Stirling dynamo produces power based on a solid fuel. And so we're going to also chuck in a auxiliary reaction chamber, as well as multi-cycle injectors to increase the generation rate and fuel efficiency so that they're much better. That is going to power this in order to turn the resin into rosin and tree oil. And now what we're going to set up is the rosin needs to go out the back because the rosin is going to be going up into our fun-loving dynamo. And the reason for that is because that's what's going to be in the dynamo powering it. So we'll take that out, and that should have enough power right now to actually be generating enough for it to use, which is great. And you can actually set up multiple of these trees for this, and you can use, I don't actually know the exact amount of trees, but you can use a considerable amount if you add in the augments, because it speeds up the process and the energy that you get from it. Though, the tree oil is not being used right now. So what we need to do is we need to pipe that out. And what that's going to go into is actually a compression dynamo. And the reason why we have this flux cell is to show how much power this is actually going to be generating. So this gotta go like that. And we can plop augments in here. But essentially this just uses a liquid fuel and goes off of a liquid fuel. So once we get that, and probably need to place the fluid pipe, make sure that it's exporting, and essentially tree oil will be producing RF. It'll go slowly based on what can be input from this. So auto input is enabled, but apparently it's still not wanting to work. So that didn't... What? Okay, so that means that this side is the one that needs to be inputting. And essentially, this will, after it's gone, it's producing 80 RF per tick, which is quite a bit. Of course, this isn't perfectly neutral, like you're going to need to add a little bit extra. And of course, these item pipes are completely overkill. I just grabbed the highest tier ones, but there are much lower tier ones that are more effective for this particular, use case. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook up another tree, and let's actually hook up 2 trees, because that's probably what you're gonna want to start with, and then we'll see just how fast you can be generating a healthy amount of power. Another thing that I like about this is that you can set these up like in front of your base as a wall of trees, and it honestly doesn't look bad. It looks quite cool, actually, to the point where you can just use it as like a barrier wall, and it doesn't look out of place or anything. You're just essentially having trees that are also doing something for you. So if you have thermal series stuff, then I would highly recommend making something similar. You don't actually need to, of course, this pipe arrangement is a little bit suboptimal, and the math isn't perfect on what you're going to be generating from the tree oil. I may make a more advanced, but this is supposed to be more of just a simple little, thing for starting power generation before you get into like solar arrays and other stuff from some bigger mods. But this should be at this point enough for us to be actually filling this up. And so we'll have 100% power just being generated the entire time. Ideally. And that's just 80 RF per tick, which is going to fill this up quite fast. Of course, you're not going to need this much power within such a short amount of time on, like, very beginning level stuff. But if you want to, you can scale this absolutely massively. And I will probably make a video if you guys want to see that on that, of just a massive scale renewable arboreal extractor resin related farm, because I love that stuff and I think it's quite cool. So if you guys want to see that, renewable resources in Minecraft, you don't have to use fossil fuels. You can also go solar, but solar stuff sometimes it's a little boring. You don't get to make a cool contraption. But anyway, that's gonna be the end of this video, so I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more, I make a ton of other videos, so I hope you will enjoy. Peace, have a great day, see ya.